Hi, everyone. If you can hear me, it'll be great if you can post a yes in the YouTube chat window. I guess you can hear me, right? And you can see the screen as well. So welcome to the live session, and our live session is on how non-English speakers can score well in GMAT Verbal, and we'll be speaking about best practices and techniques on how to go about it. So I hope that you guys can hear me, and so to get started with, I'm Rachel. I am from Crack Verbal. And before we get started with the session, I'd like to introduce Crack Verbal to you all. I'm sure you would have seen our website or YouTube videos, or you would have come across our YouTube channels or on social media, right? But to simply put, Crack Verbal, at Crack Verbal, we help GMAT aspirants like you to achieve the target GMAT scores. And if you are an MBA aspirant, we would love to help you with your MBA applications as well and get you into the top B school of your choice. So that's the simplest way of putting across what we do. And so we have sent students to top B schools in the US, in India. So if you are looking to get into a Wharton or Columbia Business School, we would be able to help you. Whereas when it comes to India, if you would like to apply to ISB or IIM as well, it's we still have services that can help you out, right? And so in terms of GMAT prep, we have online GMAT prep options, which is we have a GMAT on-demand program, which you can take at your own pace. Whereas we also have the GMAT Live at Home program, which in which you can attend live classes online, right? Where we have our faculty members teach you concepts, applications, and even more when it comes to strategies, right? So that's a little bit of a brief intro about Crack Verbal. What I would like to do right now is post a link in the chat so that you can go ahead and download free GMAT prep resources, which will help you with your GMAT prep, right? I'm assuming most of you have either started your GMAT prep or are looking to get started with your GMAT prep. So I'm sure that you will find these resources very helpful. Give me a second. Yeah. So yes, I hope you've received the link. Just a couple of things before we get started. One is use the chat to submit general queries. You can please keep the questions to after the session so that the speaker does not lose his flow. And you can clear all your doubts after the session, and you can ask as many questions as you like. Arun would be happy to help you out, right? So I'd like to introduce Arun before we get started with the session itself. So I'm sure you know Arun as well. So Arun Jagannathan is the founder of Crack Verbal. He's also the founder of English for India, which is they offer corporate English training programs. And he has trained more than 30,000 students as of now over a span of more than 2 decades, right? And if you wish to connect with him on LinkedIn, we are posting the link to his LinkedIn profile in the chat. You can click on it and connect with him. He will be happy to answer any of your queries. And if you would like to write to him, you can write to arunj@crackverbal.com. You can see the email ID given here. He will be happy to reply to your questions as well. So Arun is here. I can see him here. So I'm handing the session over to Arun. Arun, you can take it from here. I'm stopping.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And wanted to just share my screen so that I can also do a little bit of writing on the screen. So I hope all of you are able to see the screen, able to hear me speak. So what we're going to do today is really try to answer this question, which is there anything different about non-English speakers? And is there a way in which the way they approach verbal, is there anything that we could change? Is there anything that I have to offer in my experience? So as Rachel mentioned, I've been teaching GMAT for close to 2 decades now. So what I really want to do over the next 1 hour is I want to keep the schedule tight. I want to make sure that I'm able to deliver value. So I have a set of things that I've kind of thought of what I would have to say if I want to share my thoughts with you. Because I just wanted to start with this quote that I've spoken to so many students who all have been in your shoes at some point, right? And these are students who have gone on to score high GMAT scores, who have gone on to some of the top B schools in the world. But you would be surprised to know that perhaps most people who start off their journey end up having similar fears, right? But what we need to believe is that at the end of the day, for every problem, there is a solution, right? And apply our mind. And what I'm also going to request you is for today's session, is it okay for me to also ask you questions, right? So I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to give you some time to respond, but I would like you to be present in the session. It is not just about you consuming information, but it's also about you thinking, what you need to do. So I think the first thing that I just wanted to kind of put is, what is it that I have in store for you today? What is it that I think I wanted to share with you? So the first thing that I wanted to tell you is, what does GMAT really test you on, right? So it looks very obvious. Many of you might say that, Arun, it tests us on English and maths, right? We know that. Well, you would be surprised to know that GMAT is testing you for very specific skills. And in today's session, my intent is to show how GMAT can set some of these traps for you and how it ends up, kind of creating questions. Then I'm also going to be talking about what is the right metric to assess my performance. How do I know that I'm improving? I have a lot of students who come and say that, Arun, I've been studying, but how do I really improve? How do I learn from what I have done wrong, and how do I move on? So I'm going to give you a framework. I will give you a way by which you can think about how you want to measure your performance. And while we are talking about performance, I'm going to talk about something very, very important as far as GMAT is concerned, which is time management and your ability to make educated guesses. Okay, so I'll be telling what they are. And I will also talk about some traps that non English speaking countries, and I'm going to talk about Asian countries, typically people from India, right? I could probably give a more specific example, but you could take it for most Asian countries. There are certain ways in which we have studied, right, in our schooling, and that's what we think might apply to the GMAT as well. So I'll be showing you how actually it's going to be slightly different, and I will tell you how you should really utilize the rest of the time that you have available. We are already in March, correct? For you to put in your application this year. And by the way, in the chat window, you can let me know, are you you can tell me where you are from, and B, you can also tell me what schools you're looking at, right? So you could perhaps give me this in the chat window. So while I'm kind of talking about it, uh, and we will look at the link. I think we'll have a look at why that link has an issue. So just 1 second, please. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, please let me know if you can tell me what country you're from and what schools you're looking at. I will be giving you a link. I will be giving you a plan by the end. So if you stay with me till the end of the session, I'll give you a plan which kind of gives you a very clear idea of how to go about, taking the GMAT and applying to a B school in 2021. So the first question is, what does GMAT really test you on? And you know, for me to essentially ask you this question, there is another way I want you to think, which is, I think a lot of non-native speakers are usually good in English, and I know a lot of Indians, engineers, good in English, but what we are being tested is not English, right? And the best way for us to look at it is to think of a comparison in quant, right? Let us say you want to score a quant 51, which is a full score in quant. How many formulas do you need to know? Think about it. How many formulas do you need to know? Do you need to know, I don't know, 200 formulas? 300 formulas? Maybe max, correct? Now the question is, if you know 200 or 300 formulas, at the rate of maybe around 20 formulas a day, 10 days, 200 formulas done, right? Maybe in about 2 weeks, you are done with all the formulas. Okay. Would you be able to solve a question on the GMAT? Right? And what I want to do is, in order to set context for what we have in store today, why don't we do this? Why don't we start off with a quant problem? I know I'm starting with a quant problem, though I said this is going to be for verbal, but I think it is easy for us to understand in context of quant, right? And that's why I wanted to give this example. So let's assume that there is a train, and this train is going from A to B, all right? And it's going at 40 kilometers per hour. And the distance between them is 200 kilometers. Now, usually in such questions, you know how you have a trap, right? So there is a bird sitting on top of the train. Now, what the bird does is it also starts flying towards point B. But what the bird does is the moment it touches point B, it starts flying back towards the train. Now think about it. The train has also moved some distance. So at some point between A and B, the bird touches the train and then starts flying towards B. Then it keeps repeating this zigzag movement till the train and the bird reach point B together. All right. Question to you then is, you cannot see the marker on the screen. Okay. Sorry about it. I thought that I had shown the question. Let me just show this question again, right? So this was the question, all right? So there is a bird. So just read the question. So there is a train going from point A to B. It's going at 40 kilometers per hour, right? And then there is a bird that is sitting on top of the train, and that is also going towards point B. At some point, the bird reaches point B first, turns back, starts flying towards a train, touches the train, turns back, does this zigzag movement till. So what I'm really wanting is D1, D2, D3, D4, all the way till D1. What will be the summation of this? Or, what would be the answer? And I'm going to give you like a good minute to think. So I'm just going to keep it on the phone. You can let me know your answers in case you think you have an answer. Robbie, just give me the answer. Just put the answer. That will be fine. And also, people who are not able to think, I'm okay if you want to type in give up. If you want to give up, that's also fine. If you say, Arun, I have no idea, right? After you told me all this, my brain is not working. That's also fine. All right, roughly we are into about a minute into it, correct? So on the GMAT, if you haven't really figured out what the answer is, right, it is going to be hard for you to actually solve such a question, right? Now, anybody over here who actually did not solve, who looked at all of these values and decided to give up? Correct, Robbie, I'm going to be solving that. So I think what you're saying is that. But anybody who felt that I wanted to give up on this question? Anybody said, you know what, at some point my brain stopped working? Because that's also sometimes what happens is that when we see a question and we are not able to solve it, we tend to think that there is a magic formula that we need to have, right? A magic formula that will somehow tell me what the answer is. Very, very simply put, if you look at it, the train will take 5 hours to reach point B, correct? Because it's has to travel 200 kilometers at 40 kilometers per hour. Now the bird, irrespective of what direction it flies, the total duration of flight is 5 hours at 60 kilometers per hour. So it has to travel 300 kilometers. Therefore, answer option E. Right? Now, when you see the answer, what happens is you realize that the only formula that is required is equal to speed is equal to distance upon time. Right? Now, think about it. You knew this formula, correct? You knew this formula, you still couldn't solve the question. But at the same time, you couldn't have solved the question had you not known this formula. Now, I want to draw an analogy for verbal. Think of verbal also like that. There are set of finite formulas, but the formulas by themselves are not going to save you. What you require is application of those formulas under time constraint, right? That's the key that you need to remember. It is knowing the formula, applying the formula under the time context. The moment you take all these three factors, you realize that GMAT is no longer a test of English or maths. If you ask me, GMAT is really a test of your ability to critically think. If you think of any post-MBA career that you can think of, let's say you want to be a consultant, or you want to be an investment banker, you want to be a product manager, all of them require you to read a lot, but distill that information, get to the crux of that information so that you can answer relevant questions. Right? That's a very key part of your job. What is that? That is nothing but reading comprehension. Right? Once you look at all that information, you can't just go and tell your boss that, hey, I got all this information. GE is going to say, okay, what are the conjectures we can draw? Right? What are the things that I can infer from what is given? Will the current data impact my argument? Right? All of these are things that. So, Rachel, if you can just post on the chat window, if you can just help me with because I know that there is a problem with the Zoom lately. So if you can just post it on the other chat window, whenever the screen is not moving, I'll be able to. So once you read that information, you kind of process that information, right? You are able to critique that. You are able to critically analyze it, right? That is nothing but critical reasoning. And then eventually what you're expected is, you're expected to put that information in clear, concise way in front of management. What is that? That is nothing but sentence correction. And in all of this, you will have to juggle multiple data, you kind of understand what data is really trying to say, understand the difference between how percentages go up, or all of this is just critical extension of executive decision making, right? So don't try to think of GMAT as English, because if you are a non-native speaker, if you are an Indian, for example, right, you have not learned English as the only language. You have learned so many other languages. It is very easy for us to think that I need to learn English. You don't need to learn English. You need to know how to use verbal ability, right? It's a very different kind of skill, right? So I want you to keep that in mind. And why I say this also is because you need to understand that GMAT prep is about being smart, right? GMAT prep is not it's not like a relation between time and your score, right? So what happens a lot of times is that people keep on preparing, right? Thinking that there is some point where I will learn all the formulas or all the rules of grammar by which miraculously I'll be able to solve all sentence correction questions. Not going to happen. In fact, I would say that the amount of stuff that you need to remember on the GMAT is fairly finite, right? It is not a test of memory. If you take the civil services exam in India, it's a test of memory. You need to remember a lot. GMAT doesn't expect you to remember a lot. But how do I use this finite information, right, in that particular context? That's what GMAT is going to really test you on. Okay, so that's what I wanted to kind of start with, give you as the first point. The second point I wanted to ask is, how do I measure myself, right? How do I measure myself? And for this, important for me to also get your responses in the chat window. So it will be great if you could just type out of the chat window. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, all right? So let's start off with the first one, okay? What is the capital of Turkey? And please don't Google, okay? Please don't Google. Look at the answer options that you have. And why don't you let me know in the chat window what you think is the answer? So you have Istanbul, you have Ankara, Antalya, Adana, Izmir. And really, it could be whatever you think, but and I'm assuming that at some point I'm going to be seeing some responses on the chat. Okay, so I think I have to. Yeah, so I have the. Yeah, so okay, so okay, so I have Ankara, I have Istanbul, I have one more Ankara. Okay, so here is the thing, right? So if you look at this question, what will happen is most people will be very sure that they are looking at Ankara, right? At Istanbul, right? So that seems to be the most obvious answer choice over here. So many of us on GMAT also end up picking questions like this, right? Now, if you thought Istanbul was the capital, the correct answer is Ankara, right? Now, the whole idea is why I give you this question is because a lot of times those who pick Istanbul, you would be very sure that you have picked Istanbul, correct? So a lot of times we are confident about our choices, but sometimes you have to understand that there is no way for you to know whether a question that you're picking is right or not. Correct? Many a times on the GMAT, I've heard this, people tell that, oh, the first 10 questions you have to get correct. How do I know that I'm going to get it correct? I am going to attempt it to the best of my ability, right? Now, here is another question, right? Now, if you ask me, this was a tough question because most people, they have heard of Istanbul, right? Which is the largest city, but Ankara is the capital. However, what if I were to tell you what is the capital of Mongolia, right? Now, I'm pretty sure many of you have not heard of the capital of Mongolia, but don't worry, this is GMAT, okay? And GMAT will also give you 4 answer options. People ask me, are questions tough? And I tell them that questions are tough, sure, that's only one part of it. But you know what? There is another factor that we need to consider, which is the other answer options. Okay, so in case you did not know what the capital of Mongolia was, let us look at the let's look at the this and now tell me what do you think is the capital of Mongolia, right? Now, when you look at all the answer options, right, very clearly, you know it has to be C because it cannot be all of this, right? You know it cannot be A, B, D, E, has to be C, correct? So If you ask me between this question and this question, which one is easier? This was definitely the easier question, right? So many a times what happens, why I wanted to tell you this was when you look at a question, do not try to judge a question, right? We think that we know it is an easy question or hard question, we do not know, right? It's only after we kind of analyze would we be able to kind of come to a point where we know what it is, right? So what I would do is try to look at accuracy or difficulty level. Many a time I've had people come and tell me that, Arun, right, my accuracy is 60%. But my point is your accuracy is 60% for tough questions, right, is actually fantastic. But if your accuracy is 60% for easy questions, then you have a problem in your hand. Because if you're going to get 60% accuracy, you're probably never going to see tougher questions on the GMAT. So very important that you start measuring how you are making your mistakes, correct? Not use just accuracy or difficulty level. In fact, here is a small table that I could use for you, right? So I'm going to give it as NMGTS. N stands for nailed it. These are questions where it says length is 5, breadth is 4. What is the area of the rectangle? Correct? I can wake you up at 3 a.m. You'll be able to tell me that the answer is 20. You're going to learn nothing from such questions. Missed it. That was a very obvious thing that I oversaw. It was no trap or a trick or anything. It was a very obvious error. 9 out of 10 times I would get it right, but this one time I ended up getting it wrong. Okay. You asked me, you are not going to learn much from the first two categories. Then you have what I would call as guessed it. What is guessed it? Guessed it is where you are between the last two answer options. And how many of you have seen that, right? I'm sorry. I think the screen is really giving me issues. So the screen is, yeah, so you're able to see it. Okay. So G stands for guessed it, where you were between the last two answer options, but you ended up picking the wrong one, right? But here is the deal. What I want you to do is, while you're practicing, don't wait to see the answers before saying that you guessed it. If you are between two answer options and you are a little unsure which one, or you think there is another answer option that seems to be very close, what I would like you to do is just put an asterisk, okay, next to that question. Okay, just put an asterisk next to that question, right? And irrespective of whether you get it right or wrong, this is a question where you had to guess, correct? So that's important. You had to guess on this question. Please make sure that you put it as a G. There is a fourth category where you may have got it right, but you spent way too much time, right? You spent way too much time trying to solve the question, okay? And what happens at the end of the day, it is just not worth your time, correct? So that's the key for timed it, okay? And the last one is what I would call as stumped, screwed, whatever you want to call it. This is the question where you had no idea what the answer option is, or it was a concept that you have not even heard of. These are the questions where you will learn the most from. Okay, these are the questions that will give you the maximum juice. If you ask me, there are two students, A and B, and both A and B practice, solve 100 questions. Let's say A gets accuracy of 60%, B gets accuracy of 40%. But A goes back and doesn't do anything, right? Whereas B ends up analyzing each and every question, right? Make sure that he has not missed out anything, right? Are you able to see? I hope. Yeah. So in terms of, if I were to place my bet on someone, if say there is another set of 100 questions that has to be given, right? Who would I place my bet on? Would I place my bet on A or B? Most definitely, I'll place my bet on B, right? Because what happens is that it is not where you come from, it is where you are going that matters the most, right? So whether you got 40% accuracy, 50% accuracy should not matter, right? What is important is, am I learning from my mistakes? Am I spending way too much time? Or am I getting caught between the last two answer options? Is it that I'm not conceptually weak? These are the questions that you need to ask yourself. These are the right metrics that we need to assess ourselves with. Okay. The screen is updated, I guess. I'll just see this. Yeah, the screen. Okay, I got it. So, sorry, I think the screen was so. Yeah, so I wasn't actually seeing it, but really I just had to put this over here. Yeah. Um, so one question I wanted to just focus on, which is something a lot of times when we start preparing for the GMAT, we tend to miss out. Okay. Something that, which is our objective, and I'm just wanting to make sure that your objective is not to score a perfect 800. Even if you're going to tell me that, Arun, I'm okay with a 760 on the GMAT, which is a 99 percentile, right? Even this can be achieved with a bunch of mistakes, right? You need a verbal 42, so don't worry about the raw scores, but essentially you need a quant 50, verbal 40, 42. Easily you can get about 3 or 4 questions wrong, about 5 or 6 questions wrong, and still you can get a 760. So what I'm trying to say is, the way the algorithm works, right, is that you have to be consistently at a particular level. You do not need to get every question right. This is not a linear scale. Okay. So if you ask me, and I've had students who on the day of the test have done very well. Why? Because I'm going to go back to the 3 factors that I told you, right? A lot of times, Indians, Asians, we tend to fixate a lot more on knowledge, right? It is not just knowledge, but what are the other 2 factors I told you? Second factor was your ability to apply it onto the question. And the third factor is in terms of using time to your advantage, right? Your biggest thing is in verbal, I have barely 108 seconds per question. And in quant, I just have 120 seconds per question. That's it, right? So very important that we are able to figure out how to maximize our time. So what I'm going to do is, just to get you guys thinking about it, um, why don't we take this question? So you can let me know in the chat window. A bacterium doubles every day. 10 days, the container is filled. How long would it take to fill half the container? Right? So this is one of those questions, and I want all of you to think. Okay. Um, so many a times, what happens is we think that the question requires something more complicated than what it really is, right? So if it is going to fill it in 10 days and it is doubling every day, then on day 9, it is going to be half filled, right? And then the last day, it is going to double, which is when it is going to fill the entire container. The reason I'm giving this question is, again, going back to what I said, which is sometimes, on questions, you need to know when to guess. Many a times people get stuck in questions. They tend to spend way too much time. So a very important question to ask is, should I guess and move on? At what stage do I guess? In fact, in crack verbal, one of the things that we teach is also this, which is at some point on the GMAT, it is very important that you start guessing. You start guessing. Zoom is really acting up today. Sorry about that. Okay, but you really start guessing on the GMAT, right? So what I told you was, as I said, you have you can set, 5 to 6 questions in verbal, you can guess. So here is what you can think of, right? So assume that every 15 minutes, you can solve 9 questions, right? So this becomes your pacing chart, right? This becomes your pacing time, right? What it means is that I'm going to multiply this by 4. So in about 60 minutes, you should be done with about 36 questions, right? Now you'll say, Arun, but on the GMAT, we have 65 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a 5 minutes buffer, right? This is extra 5 minutes that you can use in case something goes wrong, in case you want to kind of, you know, uh, in case there are these emergencies for which you need those extra 5 minutes. Okay. So my question to you is, what is your current pace? Are you able to solve 9 questions, which would be, let's say, 2 questions of sentence correction, 2 questions of CR, maybe one passage, or maybe three, and then one short passage, whatever the case be, correct? If you are able to solve 9 questions in 15 minutes, I know for a fact that you are able to pace yourself, you are able to time yourself. And right now, you may not be in a position to solve 9 questions. Can you do 7 questions in 15 minutes? That's fine. Correct? At least you know how fast you need to be running. Correct? Because on the GMAT, if you're trying to control your entire 60 to 65 minutes, right? 36 questions, it is not going to happen, right? Better for us to split it into smaller things and manage our time that way. The penultimate point I had was one thing that I feel, and I'm sorry if I'm not trying to stereotype, but a lot of times, Indian education system, for example, focuses a lot on saying ki you know a particular question, you solve 100 questions of that pattern, right? And on the actual test, your board exams, you will get something which is probably modeled after the 100 questions that you have practiced. Okay, so this is what I call as the brute force approach. Correct. For example, let's take this question. This is a sentence correction question. All of you know how it works in sentence correction. I'll just try. I think it's best to refresh my screen time to time. So let's take this question. As well as heat and light, the sun is the source of continuous stream of atomic particles known as solar wind. Okay. Besides heat and light, also the sun. Besides heat and light, the sun is also the source of continuous streaming. The sun is the source not only of heat and light, but also of continuous streaming. And finally, we have the sun is the source not only heat and light, but also of the continuous streaming. What do you think is the answer? Go ahead and let me know in the chat. This is a D. Okay, D. All right, wonderful. So you guys are starting to notice something. You say not only of heat and light, but also of a continuous stream, right? All of you were able to spot it, and you pretty much were able to nail it. Great. How many of you think that, Arun, because not only X, but also Y, that is why I was able to answer this? Not only of X, but also of Y. Excellent. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you another question, and I want you to remember one thing, which is that GMAT questions, tough questions, may look similar, but there is something that makes them hard. If you ask me, Viplav, that was probably a 550 level question, maybe, right? It's a very elementary question. But let us now look at this. It's a slightly longer question, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Just give you the time once again. Let me just share the screen. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. About 108 seconds over. This is how long you would have on the GMAT to solve such a question. So we got B, 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 A, E, D, A, E. So first up, is this a harder question? Right? Think about it. Is it a harder question? Right? It is, right? Because last time all of you were unanimous with your answer that it's D for delta, correct? But this time around, I see answers all over the place. And from what I see on the chart, B seems to be the majority. Question to you, if it's a tough question, would the majority be right or wrong? And I want you to think about it. GMAT knows this, right? GMAT knows that the way you're going to be looking at it, the way you're going to be thinking about it is as you did previously. Perhaps you saw the not only here and said, but also, correct? But I want you to think about it, not only, but also, when is it used? Not only X, but also Y. When is it used? We use it when you have positives or two negatives, right? So we could say he was not only very generous, but also very handsome, right? Or you could say two negatives. He was not only very evil, but also very ugly. But you're not going to say he was not only generous, but also ugly, right? So you're not going to be using a positive and a negative together. If you want to use a positive and a negative together, what you use is but also. Going to the movies these days is a very enjoyable experience, but also a very risky one. Enjoyable, yes, but also very risky. So positive, negative will be used with but also. Now, this is where the meaning of the sentence, especially in the case of sentence correction, comes into play. Correct? So what happens is, I'm just going to, sorry about it. It just keeps happening. I don't know what's wrong with the correction. But the whole idea is whenever you look at a positive or a negative, in this case, create farmlands and gave residents comparatively cheap houses. Positive. But it caused soil quality depletion and turned whole areas into desert. Negative. Correct? Positive and negative cannot be not only but also. Answer option A, B and E go off, what you require is but also. Okay. And in this case, what happens over here is you have creating and giving, right? Whereas you needed caused and turned. So parallel to caused and turned is created and gave. So D for delta. Okay. Now, why did I give this question? Because I wanted to also tell you that, look, this is what GMAT is testing you on a tougher question, right? As a non-native speaker, I think one of the things that we should be very guarded is using our ear, especially for idioms, right? That's not something that usually, is. So this is what I would like you to think of, right? When you're looking at the GMAT, which is, don't use brute force. Just try to understand, apply yourself to the meaning of the question, and you will be able to kind of figure out which you don't need to worry about the rules of grammar as much. And the last point that I had is uh, you need to be consistent in solving GMAT questions, and you have to do it from the right kind of resources. If GMAT is not a test of English and maths, what is it? So a lot of times students ask me, Arun, I'm not able to solve a GMAT question. Does that make me, does that mean that I have less IQ? I say no. All the years that I've spent teaching the GMAT, if I can tell you one thing, it has nothing to do with your IQ. It is about your ability to figure out the GMAT. So I tell them that means you have not figured out the GMAT. Doesn't mean how smart you are. Okay, it means you're not figured out the GMAT. So very, very important that we start thinking the way GMAT thinks. And how do you think the way GMAT thinks? The best way for us to do that is actually take use of the official resources. On GMAT Club, if you apply the tag of official resources, you will be able to see the questions that have come over the years under various OGs, right? So that is kind of questions that are discussed. There are threads, right? But in case you have not done so already, my strong recommendation is download the GMAT starter kit available for free on MBA.com and take a full-length GMAT test. I think that will give you a very good sense of what the GMAT is, because solving questions in isolation, solving questions in your bedroom with your, in your pajamas, at night when you're comfortable is not what GMAT is, right? It's your ability to solve questions one after the other, right? And how do you apply your presence of mind? So my recommendation, take a full test. There are also free practice tests that are available. So you can buy the free practice tests. Along with that, there is also the official guide. So the official guide is a set of retired GMAT questions. So that is a very useful resource for us to know what GMAT is thinking. The more questions you solve, the smarter you will get. The more mistakes you make, the more you will know what GMAT is trying to really test you on. And for that, I would also suggest quantitative review, verbal review, and if required, the advanced questions, right? This resource, that is OG, has about 600 questions. This has, I think, about 300 questions each. So all put together, maximum that you need is about 1,500 questions. If your scores are not going to improve in 1,500 questions, trust me, they will not improve with even 15,000 questions. And I'm just trying to, tell you the point, that is, learn, analyze, apply, repeat. Learn, analyze, apply, repeat, right? Learn, apply, analyze, and then repeat. So first, you learn what the concept is, then you apply it onto a question, a GMAT standard question, see how that theory applies to it. Once you have done that, analyze it. What part of this was I not able to figure out? What part could I have guessed? What part I could have done differently? That basically then gives you the loop, and then you keep repeating what you have. All right. And lastly, I just wanted to let you know that in our course, we do follow the OG. In fact, our course, we offer the OG because that's where we kind of have our most of our strategies that we teach on the GMAT. are based on the official test, on the official questions, right? So if you understood how this works, you will realize that mindlessly mugging up idioms is not going to help you, correct? So, for example, one of the tips that I have, especially if you are a non-native speaker of the language, please don't use idiom in your first line of defense. Or if you are using idioms, make sure that you are able to bet, like, I don't know, $1,000 on that. Okay, if you're not able to bet, then you're probably not sure about that idiom. So you should not be using it. Correct? So yeah, so I think that's a link that was given. Um, okay, so that's all I had. I think we have done it with about some time to spare. So let me just try to see if there are some questions that I can take on. We have one question. I have one question, which is, um, what's the difference between the practice exam and the online question banks? Uh, Practice exam is adaptive in nature, right? You will get a 3-digit GMAT score at the end of your test. Okay. Whereas in the case of a question bank, you will have a bunch of questions that you can add. You can say, give me only quant questions, only sentence correction questions, easy questions, hard questions, whatever it is, you can actually apply those filters, but it will not be a adaptive test. You will not get a 3-digit GMAT score, correct? That is more to build your stamina. That is more to reinforce the concepts that you have learned, correct? Um, so anything else? And in general, wanted to just say that as far as GMAT is concerned, right? If you're starting with your prep, just remember we are currently kind of at the end of March. So let me just give you a sample plan: April, May, June, July, August, September, and October to December, right? So 2020, you have essentially 3 quarters left. The idea is you end up taking the GMAT. Make sure you focus on getting a good score on the GMAT, because everything else will be based on that, right? Um, in terms of July, August, September, this is when you research about the school. Now that you have the GMAT score with you, you also start working on your essays. You also figure out your recommendation letters, all the components of your application. And then September, October is when you're going to apply. And hopefully, you get an interview call somewhere around November. And by December, you know your admit status, right? So that's really how I would I would uh, plan out my 2020. So you guys have a good 3 months to crack the GMAT. So make sure that how to ace RC. So see, that may not be something that is within the purview of what we have, but I just wanted to tell you that one thing that I usually say is that when we say reading comprehension, correct? There is reading, and then there is comprehension, right? There are two parts. So what we do is we teach a technique by which we do two types of reading. So when you look at reading is of different types. One type of reading is when you know what information uh, you don't know what information is going to be asked, which is in your first week. So I would prop in your first go. So that is what is skimming. Scanning is when I've already read and then I go back to the question and I'm answering the question, and that part I'm going back to the passage in order to find my answers. So you have to look at both the parts and you have to optimize both your parts, correct? The skimming part and the scanning part. I think more time. I'll share. I have one more question. Wordings of some question in quant stumps us how to solve them. So the idea is that GMAT is trying to confuse you based on the wordings, right? So that is one of the things that GMAT uses. It's a tool that it uses in its arsenal. So instead of fighting it, always try to look at it with a sense of curiosity, right? What is GMAT trying to say? Is there any other information that this sentence contains, right? So that's the attitude that we develop when we solve it, especially when you are at a higher score on quant, like you're at a 50, 51, you'll realize that many a times the way in which the question is worded could be put in ways that could confuse you, right? You have to be careful. One more question that we have is, my test is in 2 weeks, but I did not do any exam prep. To be honest, what I would suggest is take a full-length test, right? That's what I would do. I would say take a full-length test because when you take a full-length test, you will get a good idea of where you are, correct? So take stock of your situation. That's what I would say, because in 2 weeks, it is possible that if you already start at, let's say, a quant 47, 48, a verbal 37, 38, it is possible for you to kind of optimize it. But if your scores are lower, then you might need more time. But I would definitely suggest that you take a full-length test from this thing. So Jayant, it's not a question of smiling, it's just a question of it's 10:30 right now, end of a long day. So I hope I was able to deliver value. Any other questions? I'm going to be here for another minute or so. And if not, I just want to leave you with this thought, which is we really fail when we stop trying. A lot of GMAT is just about being smart, about knowing what, making sure that you think about it, that you are able to apply yourself onto these questions. Treat it right like a riddle, treat it like a puzzle, and I'm pretty sure you will get the higher scores. If you're going to just try to, okay, I think the screen got slightly stuck at some point. Let me just, yeah. So just keep at it, and anything that you need, I think you have the coordinates. You can always reach out to our team for any help with your GMAT prep, and we would be glad to help you with that. All right. So thanks a lot for your time. I think we are pretty much on time. It's about 10:30. Wish you all a very good night if you are joining from this side of the coast, and hope to see you sometime in one of my live classes. So I use this. I actually use Zoom for our weekend classes that we have. So in case you are interested, you can always check on with Crackle. All right. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye. Good night.